Hello everybody and welcome on back to another video. I'm your host, the OTS Starties, and I've decided today to have a little topic of conversation. And of course that topic is Doctor Who. And in particular, I'm thinking of, well, this is more of an opinion, when I say Doctor Who will never peak again. Unless the British Borg Collective decide to get their asses in gear. But we know that's not going to happen, is it? The reason why I make this video is because I don't think I have seen a good episode of Doctor Who since Peter Capaldi left. Now, with Capaldi's Doctor, I have it's a balance for me. Some of his episodes I did enjoy, some others I didn't. But Peter Capaldi, to me, was the last decent Doctor that we got. You know, I think the 13th Doctor was just a massive virtue signalling, look at me, I'm a strong woman. As for the Return to Tennant, I just think that was just nostalgia bait in order to make everybody forget about the Jodie Whitaker era. And Ncuti's Doctor is... The Doctor would never gyrate to Kylie Minogue. And more importantly is that no Doctor, even Jodie Whitaker and Jo Martin, would ever run away from danger. One of the many aspects why the Doctor is so beloved is because he's brave. He never runs away from monsters. He confronts them and he stops them. And he never gives up. And that is also a great aspect of a good role model. People like original trilogy Luke Skywalker, Commander Shepard, CM Punk, Eddie Guerrero, Optimus Prime, Ultra Magnus. All of these people had faced adversity and never backed down. Even when the times seemed to be dark, even when the darkest hours were upon them, they never gave up. When I produced Gallifrey Falls, which is my stop motion movie, one thing that I wanted to do, and that was the most important thing when thinking about the Doctor's character, and actually I came to realise this as the film was just finishing up, that this is a story about determination. And this is what I wanted to make the Doctor, determined to save Gallifrey from the Daleks, you know, even though his homeworld seemed to be lost. And that's what I think that this Doctor needs to do, this new Doctor, the Ncuti Doctor, needs to do, is to reflect on what his past incarnations accomplished and how they never gave up, even when all hope seemed lost. But with this Doctor, it's the complete opposite. Another aspect I want to talk about is the 60th anniversary celebration. Now, if you compare this to 10 years ago with the 50th, this is when Doctor Who was at its peak. Like, it'd been the highest that it had ever been. You know, Big Finish had got a massive 50th anniversary story planned, An Adventure in Space and Time, which was a celebration about the origin of Doctor Who, with David Bradley as William Hartnell, who would then go on to reprise his role as the first Doctor for Twice Upon a Time and Big Finish. Books were released, so there was one with 11 Doctors and 11 stories. There was the Five-ish Doctors. There was Doctor Who at the Proms. It was the hell of a time to be alive. You know, and I'm not just talking in Doctor Who terms, but in the world terms. You know, we had a great schedule on BBC Radio 2. There was a lot of other choices on other radio stations if you didn't like mainstream. You know, and it wasn't all commercialised. You had Minecraft, Xbox 360, you had Transformers War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron, you had Transformers Prime, you had Lego Hero Factory Brain Attack, and then after that, everything started to go downhill, i.e. Disney Star Wars. But enough about that. When you talk about the 60th, personally, all we got to me was nostalgia bait to make everybody forget about the Jodie Whittaker era, to make everyone remember the good times, which I don't think works. You had a range of Big Finish stories of which I had no interest in whatsoever. You had your premiere in which only the shills were invited to, which is what I've noticed with Disney Star Wars as well. You know, Lucasfilm invites all the people that praise their material, but not original Star Wars fans who like the EU. And it's very much the same with Doctor Who as well. You know, not calling out the fans or anything, but it's not what it used to be. And some of this is because of the woke ideology that is getting pushed in our society. And I don't think Doctor Who has always been woke. In fact, woke wasn't even a word back then, or a term, I should say. You know, back then, woke just meant you've had a kip and you just woken up. And I don't like when you persecute someone in a TV show, especially those that don't agree with you. Now, Doctor Who has been political in the past, but it was balanced. Whereas 2017 onwards, they had an agenda. It's clear to see that. And that agenda has been kept up today. And when you force something on somebody, it silences them into a corner and it is bullying. It's okay to think differently to somebody else, but what is not okay is when you force somebody into thinking what you think. And that's what I feel this entire new era has been. Now, a few days ago, prior to this recording, I uploaded a few polls onto the channel in my community tab, which asked when did Doctor Who peak in the classic and the new Who era. Now, the classic era one was divided. So one person said 1963 to 1970 as of this moment, as of this recording I should say, and another person said 1982 to 1986. And on the new Who edition, there's only one person voted as of this moment, and they said 2005 to 2007. So a nice little collective mix there of people's opinions. Personally, I believe it had peaked for the classic era definitely during the Tom Baker era, and for the new Who I would say Tennant to Capaldi. So now I'm going to talk about how much of a phenomenon Doctor Who was back in the old days, and how it peaked, I mean when it peaked in my opinion, for both the classic era and the new Who era. So let's start from the beginning, shall we? So Doctor Who caught on very quickly, without a doubt. You know, so many people really enjoyed William Hartnell's Doctor, and I've spoken to some people who can remember back to when William Hartnell was the Doctor. And then, of course, we had Patrick Troughton, and at that bit, it had caught on in America when they made the Dalek movies featuring Peter Cushing and Bernard Cribbins. Out of the two Dalek films, though, I have only seen Daleks Invasion Earth, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, every moment of it. You know, I liked Peter Cushing's Doctor. I think he was a worthy alternative version of Hartnell. And then we have the second Doctor, whose was a completely different character to the first Doctor, and it was a welcome change by a fair few people. And that era featured some amazing stories, like The Web of Fear, which is iconic. So is Power of the Daleks, which was reanimated as it was part of the Lost episodes. We also had the Moon Base, Tomb of the Cybermen, the Invasion, and so on. And then we go into the Third Doctor era, where the Doctor turned into an action hero working with UNIT, which I think worked really well and was a nice break from the TARDIS. And we had the 10th anniversary special, the Three Doctors. We had companions like Joe Grant, Liz Shaw, Sarah Jane Smith. And then we go to what I think is the peak of classic Who. No matter which side of the fence you sit on, Tom Baker is the definitive Doctor Who. I think we can all agree on that. And then after that peak, I think, yes, I like Peter Davison. I think he's one of my favourite Doctors. In 1984, Doctor Who changed once Peter Davison had left the role as the Doctor, and his replacement was Colin Baker. Now, many people were dissatisfied with this at first due to his colourful coat, which has become an icon, or a fashion icon of the show's history. A lot of people had problems with this era, especially when it introduced new horror elements to the show, and when episodes were 45 minutes long rather than 20 minutes. After Colin Baker left the show in 1986 with the Trial of a Time Lord serial, which was originally another season which was lost, but then Big Finish decided to turn some of them into audio dramas, in came Sylvester McCoy, who was this darker character, but then light-hearted at the same time as well. However, it wasn't enough to save the show from cancellation in 1989, and we ended with the 7th Doctor and Ace walking off into the sunset, with, I would say, the perfect ending monologue. However, all was not lost. A series of novels were written to continue the adventures of the Doctor and Ace, as well as introducing new characters who would later be adapted into Big Finish audio dramas. And in 1996, Doctor Who the movie landed on our screens. Now, sadly, this wasn't enough to produce a full-time series featuring Paul McGann as the Doctor, but I imagine that it would be a bit like Buffy and Star Trek The Next Generation, because 90s TV was awesome. Can you imagine an 8th Doctor series featuring Paul McGann with the special effects budget of Star Trek Deep Space Nine and monsters that were inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer? And of course, with that we had the Wilderness years, where lots of novels were written. Big Finish was just starting up in 1999. And it was a free place for the fan base to make their own mind up about what happened. In 2005, Doctor Who had made its long-awaited returns to the screens, ran by Russell T Davies, who I would say is arguably one of the greatest writers of our generation. And the show was forefronted by Christopher Eccleston as the 9th Doctor. This introduced the concept of the last great Time War. We brought back the Daleks. And even though Eccleston ran for one season, short but sweet are the words I would use to describe this era. Now, Christopher Eccleston left Doctor Who, and his replacement was David Tennant. And this is what would be, I would say, one of the most iconic Doctors and one of the most iconic British actors known to Britain, and I would say the world as well. You know, the first thing someone thinks of when they hear the words Doctor Who, if you ask someone of my generation, would be David Tennant, because he made that role, I would say around Series 2 time is when it started to gather momentum. When they brought back Sarah Jane Smith, a companion from the classic era, and K9 as well. They resurrected the Cybermen, and they had the battle that every Whovian had been asking for, Daleks versus Cybermen. And to conclude, we said goodbye to Rose Tyler, and the Doctor was full of grief. And I would say this has to be one of the saddest moments in Doctor Who ever. Now, for New Who, I think that it peaked around 2007 time, when the David Tennant era was in full swing, And we had the great mystery of who was Harold Saxon and what is the Time War. And I think that one of the best plot twists and cliffhangers in Doctor Who history was when the Master returned. We had two really good spin-offs, like we had Sarah Jane Adventures for the kids and Torchwood, which was aimed for older Doctor Who fans. Now, I got into Doctor Who because of Sarah Jane Adventures, because I wasn't a big fan of David Tennant, and I got into Doctor Who first time round when Matt Smith came along. And it only got better from there, because we had the return of Donna Noble, and we had the return of Rose Tyler, and eventually it built up to one of the best series finales in the show's history, which was the Stolen Earth Journey's End, in which the spin-offs, the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood, all had a role to play in this, and it was bloody amazing. And then of course we had the ending with the Dr. Donna, and we had the eventual defeat of Davros and the Daleks, which of course now turned out to be all in vain and ruined with the 60th anniversary specials. One thing to also point out about the 2005 to 2010 period was that Russell T Davies told an entire story with 2 words being bad wolf. That is what I call long-term storytelling, and I've got to admire that. Now, the 10th Doctor era ended in a phenomenal 2-parter called The End of Time, in which the Doctor and the Master had another confrontation. We saw the return of Gallifrey and Rassilon, and we saw the returns of Donna Noble, Wilfred Mott being the companion for this story. And it really felt as though we were going to say goodbye to the Doctor, with ending cameos from Rose Tyler, Captain Jack Harkness, Mickey Smith, Martha Jones. As the Tennant era came to an end, we had the new Doctor being Matt Smith. Now, Matt Smith is, out of him, Eccleston and Tennant is my favourite, because he made the show fun to watch, and some of my favourite episodes come from his era. My all-time favourite Doctor Who episodes are The Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon, because it just shows how badass he can be, especially with that confrontation with the Silence when him, Rory and River rescue Amy. Now, there was also this great mystery to Series 6 in which the Doctor was destined to die on a place called Trenzalore, and the question of who the Doctor is will be answered. And there was the mystery of who is River Song. We eventually found out that River Song was the daughter of Amy and Rory, and she then marries the Doctor. You know, a character first introduced a few years earlier, you know, at the end of her life, the fans not knowing anything about this character. Something else that was good about this era was video games. So we had the console games and we had the adventure games for PC. Now, these need to be remastered because these were this was the best Doctor Who video game to ever come out, in my opinion. What I loved about them is that it was interactive, it had featured classic monsters like the Daleks, Cybermen, Vashta Nerada, and a new entity which haunted the TARDIS. And of course there was the Gunpowder Plot one. And I kept replaying all the episodes from start to finish. I think what made them fun as well is that there were puzzles, there was scientific facts also implanted in there, and you got to explore various places like the Cyberman ship, the TARDIS, like the TARDIS drawing room, which was full of references with past Doctors. You also had collectible cards to go around and find as well, which was a bit of a bonus. And you got to play as Amy Pond as well. Now, as Series 6 ended and we went into Series 7, I was losing interest. When I eventually watched it for the first time, I could see the contrast between this and the last series. And of course, this Series 7 Part 1, I didn't like that they made Amy and Rory's love life a part of the story. But killing them off, I think, was needed because it was time for a new companion anyway. But the way that they executed this, as it happened in front of the Doctor before his very eyes, I think this was an impactful moment for the Doctor. This reminded him of losing Rose Tyler, and I think that this works very well. And after that, of course, we had Series 7 Part 2. Now, this is when I got back into Doctor Who. Of course, the entire second part of the series revolved around Clara Oswald and who she was, and I liked this mystery. And I liked Clara Oswald. I think she was a good companion for both 11 and 12. Now, I will admit something. I did watch the series first time round as later on in the series, because I think I was doing other things at that point. I'm not too sure. So I got the box set instead. Yeah, I still own DVDs. I'm an old man. And then at the end, we had The Name of the Doctor, which finally solved the mystery of Clara Oswald, and it showed her going through the various points in the Doctor's timeline. And this was foreshadowing for the 50th anniversary, in which at the end we saw our first glimpse of the late great Sir John Hurt as the War Doctor. And of course this led into the 50th anniversary special, being the Day of the Doctor, which, as I talked about earlier, had a lot of commemorations and a lot of things just happening to celebrate it. Now, the special itself, I would argue, is the best multi-Doctor story I've ever watched. You had Smith and Tennant teaming up for the first time. You had the War Doctor. You had the return of Billie Piper. You had the return of Gallifrey. And we'd finally solved the mystery of what happened to Gallifrey. You know, did he get destroyed? And we had the return of the Zygons, the return of Unit. It was phenomenal. And we had the ending of Gallifrey getting transported by every Doctor up to Peter Capaldi, which I lost my mind to. You know, I was just getting back into Doctor Who by the time the 50th rolled around. So I actually watched some of the classic Who. Virgin Media had made some of the classic stories available to watch on demand. And my first story that I watched was the final episode of Planet of the Daleks. And then my first full Doctor Who story was Resurrection of the Daleks. And my interest for Doctor Who grew only from there. Now, also in that very same year of 2013, it was announced that Matt Smith would be leaving the role of the Doctor and handing it over to Peter Capaldi. Now, the 12th Doctor made his debut during the 50th anniversary when we had that glimpse of Capaldi's iconic attack eyebrows. And we first saw him in Time of the Doctor, which of course saw Matt Smith regenerating on Trenzalore. Now, personally, this is where I think it should have ended, because in Series 6, and indeed all throughout the Matt Smith era, it was prophesised that silence will fall when the question is asked. And then we hear more about Trenzalore, and we see the Doctor's tomb. And I think it would have been a somber way to go out. But at least it would have gone out on a high note. And then coming off the 50th anniversary, Peter Capaldi's era started with the story Deep Breath, in which we see the return of the Prenocrasta Rao gang, I think that's how you pronounce it, with Jenny, Vashta and Strax. And throughout the course of the series, we had the story arc of Missy, who would later be revealed to be the Master. And I really love how insane Michelle Gomez portrayed the role as, especially in The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. One of the reasons I liked Capaldi's Doctor is because he was serious. He finally decided it was time to start to be serious, and he was masculine. My favourite Capaldi era episode has to be Flatline, because towards the end the Doctor makes this speech to the Boneless, and he names them the Boneless, and he sends them back to their own dimension. And it is that moment that tells you that, one of the moments that shows you why Peter Capaldi was a good Doctor. Series 9 was a mix for me. I liked some episodes and then I didn't. Actually, I remember one of the episodes being broadcast on my birthday, which was the one with Maisie Williams in, when they were all Vikings and when she was first introduced. I think Hellbent's a fantastic episode because it's just the Doctor in this one, no companion. There was also the Zygon Invasion and Inversion episode, where, again, another moment to show why Peter Capaldi is a fantastic actor in himself. There were episodes, though, that I didn't like, as we got towards the end of Series 9 and they decided to retcon the whole Gallifrey thing, which really annoyed me because Gallifrey's gone. I think that's how it should have always been. They shouldn't have really brought it back. And the one bit which, to me, it was the beginning of the end, when they decided to kill off Clara, then they didn't. And then we end the series with Clara Oswald and the Shielder in another TARDIS, disguised as a diner, going off into time and space. If there's one thing I hate, it's when deaths are retconned, because it just makes it feel absolutely pointless. You know, if we have Darth Maul as an example, this guy was chopped in half by Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he fell to his death on Naboo. But yet, what do? They decide to bring him back somehow. Somehow, Clara Oswald returned. And I think after that is when Doctor Who really started to lose its touch. Something else to also point out about the Capaldi era is Doctor Who Symphonic Spectacular. And there was also the Doctor Who Festival, of which I attended. And I had my programme signed by Lisa Bowerman and Beth Chambers. And I also purchased some Big Finish audios from there. So I purchased Dark Eyes 2 and something else. I can't remember what it was exactly. But yeah, Lisa Bowerman and Beth Chambers, lovely people. Now, as for Symphonic Spectacular, I went to the Wembley show, the one in Wembley Arena. And I preferred actually their version of A Good Man than the one from the official soundtrack, because it had the woman singing at the end, and it really gave it that oomph, that reminder that the Doctor is an ancient alien from Gallifrey. In 2016, Doctor Who took a year hiatus, and apart from a Christmas special at the end of it and the one appearance in Class, which to me just felt irrelevant. I wasn't bothered about it at all. The return of Dr. Mysterio was just a PG version of The Boys, and it was just... God, it was awful. But still, better than what was to come. When we then head to Bill Potts, the introduction of Bill Potts, I actually have a story about Pearl Mackie. So, I was at Comic-Con once, and I looked behind me. I was walking round, and right behind me, there was Pearl Mackie, and she gave me the loveliest smile in the world. And also, I think she's quite short as well. That's what I can remember. I liked Bill Potts. I think the team with Nardole made it quite comedic as well. But I don't think that they should have made Missy a temporary companion, because it just ruined the character a little bit. There were some episodes of Series 10 that I liked, such as Knock Knock, and of course World Enough and Time, and the return of the Mondasian Cybermen. And of course, we had two Masters teaming up with the return of the John Sim Master. The finale to Series 10 was an almost perfect send-off. But before we get to Twice Upon a Time, I need to say that Big Finish as well. This was about when the quality of Big Finish started to go downhill. When it got to Ravenous Time. You know, Dark Eyes. I'd say Dark Eyes has to be the best Big Finish story ever written, without a doubt. You have this new look for the 8th Doctor, a new companion, and an entire era in a box set. And after that we had Dark Eyes 2, 3 and 4, which featured my favourite master, Alex McQueen, and Nicola Walker returning as Livchenka, and the ending where Molly O'Sullivan sacrifices herself to destroy the Dalek time controller. And then after that we had Doom Coalition, and the trailers for this were awesome. I wish that Big Finish would make their trailers like this again, because it felt like you were watching something that wasn't mainstream Doctor Who. And to replace Molly O'Sullivan, Big Finish brought in Hattie Morahan to play Helen Sinclair. Doom Coalition 2 has to be my favourite in the series, because we are introduced to Kalira, aka the Sonomancer, we encounter River Song, we encounter the Vord, and the Doctor goes back to San Francisco. One of the villains that we are introduced to in this story is the 11. I like the concept of the 11, where all his past faces are talking at once, and I found him pretty humorous at times as well. We are also introduced to Helen Sinclair, the Sonomancer, and the main villain in an unexpected plot twist in Doom Coalition 3, Padrak. Another reason I love this story is because some of it is set on Gallifrey, and it feels like an episode of New Who. However, when Ravenous came along, I think after this is when Big Finish's story started to go downhill. I was quite frankly bored to death with Stranded 1, so I wouldn't buy any other. And Big Finish has just got uninteresting since. The 12th Doctor regenerated into Jodie Whitaker. And this, my friends, is where the car crashes. From moment one, from the reveal, I knew I was going to hate this series. And I knew that this series would say to me, this is not Doctor Who anymore. And I knew it would be a woman because it was broadcast on the same day that Emma Raducanu won a tennis competition. I can't remember if it was Wimbledon or the US Open. No episode in this era, in Jodie Whittaker's entire run as the Doctor, made me proud to be a Doctor Who fan. Every single moment was just dragging on, and the only thing that I could watch was Bradley Walsh. And it's that bad when even the companion is better than the Doctor. And then every Christmas they decided to bring back the Daleks. And these were the worst looking Daleks ever known to man. They're just a CGI nightmare. Oh, and also let's bring back the Cybermen as well, because we're out of ideas here. Oh look, let's make them ugly as well. And next we have the Sacha Dhawan Master. He's not bad, but he's not the best Master I've ever seen. I mean, he can do insane, but easily the worst part of this entire series is when canon is broken. They decided it was a good idea to make the fugitive Doctor a thing and have her hold a gun and have William Hartnell's console room. And then we have the Timeless Children. Easily the worst episode of... In fact, no. Shooty's run makes the Timeless Children look good. They decided to throw away years worth of canon building to make the Doctor this immortal, godly being, which he is not. The Doctor is not a god. He is a Time Lord, the Time Lord Victorious. Speaking of immortality, they do that to the Cybermen as well. They already did that in the comic books, and also they decided to retcon Big Finish like Dave Filoni was writing all of this, because, I don't know, the guy who wrote this isn't a Doctor Who fan. He doesn't know the lore. The Doctor had already met Mary Shelley and travelled with her and met a Cyberman. And they decided, oh, let's just throw that all away because, hey, we're the BBC. And then we had Captain Jack Harkness. About the only watchable thing of the series. And then we had Flux. Okay, the new design for the Sontarans did look good, but they would have been even better if it wasn't Jodie Whittaker. In fact, it was that bad I thought, flux this, I'll forget this even happened. Now, by 2021, it was announced that Russell T Davies would be returning as the showrunner, in which everyone had a lot of hope for, because, you know, this guy is one of the cleverest writers of our generation. Personally, I think this was a desperate plea by the BBC because they knew things were going to go to shit, so the only man they could rely on is Russell T Davies to come in and save the day. I also had high hopes when they announced that Ncuti Gatwa was the Doctor, hoping that he would change something about the role, but we were proven wrong, and boy were we. And I actually remember being at Nerdrotic's live stream to react to the announcement. The first interview was okay, but the second one with some other woman, it just lost me. Fans were also given even more hope when David Tennant and Catherine Tate returned to the role as Donna Noble and the Doctor. Now, I saw this as a desperate plea again, and they were brought back to remind everybody of when Doctor Who was good. And then Jodie Whittaker regenerated back into David Tennant, and I was, again, optimistic around the 60th anniversary specials. And then all the really woke shit really kicked off when Russell T Davies decided it was a good idea to go back to Skaro and break canon again. When they decided to get rid of Davros's wheelchair, but the reason for this is pathetic. A load of people are not going to be offended if you include something that is part of that character. And the worst part of this episode is when they destroyed Davros's name by not making him the creator of the Daleks. The Star Beast was one massive woke lecture fest when Russell T Davies decided to make it woke as shit. I just lost faith in it altogether. Not even Grogu the Star Beast could mend this. I mean, yeah, sure, Miriam Margolyes is a good actress. You know, I loved her in Blackadder and Harry Potter, of course. I didn't enjoy any of it. They made the sonic screwdriver completely overpowered by giving it the Iron Man-y effect. And then the second episode wasn't that bad, apart from the Sir Isaac Newton thing, which is historically inaccurate, which I hate in TV shows. Something that was quite sad about this episode was, of course, saying goodbye to Bernard Cribbins, where this was his last ever TV appearance, and I think this was the last thing that he ever filmed. And it's so nice that his last ever appearance is with the Doctor that he had faith in. And the third one, the giggle, Russell T Davies probably took the toy maker's plan as a shot at the fans. I hate that they made Unit HQ like the Avengers Tower, that's just copying Marvel. And we have Ncuti's introduction to the role. The Doctor does not bi-generate, he regenerates. Why does this Doctor need a happy ending? Oh yeah, and also the way he was introduced, I could tell that Russell T Davies probably fancies him. And then the Church of Ruby Road. What is so interesting about Ruby Sunday, apart from she's attractive? Why are they trying to make her this special girl who's the key to everything? Can't they just have a generic character for once and build her up? Something that really pissed me off while watching the sneak peek was having a Goblin King that eats babies. That to me screams satanic. And it made me feel very uncomfortable. The reason why my hopes went down was because I was alright for Ncuti and Millie, alright? But when Jinx Monsoon, a drag queen, was announced, that's when I lost hope. This is not RuPaul's Drag Race, this is Doctor Who. And this is a family show, and families do not want to watch a drag queen. It's alright if it's pantomime, because that's well controlled, but if it's something like whatever Jinx Monsoon was, absolutely not. And we have what I think is the worst series of Doctor Who ever created. I would rather go back and watch Colin Baker and Jodie Whitaker than watch this. If you enjoy this new era, good for you. You know, I think that you deserve a Doctor that you like. I have no problem with you. But this is my opinion on things. The thing about this Doctor is that he's soy. He is weak and he runs away from everything. And this is so unlike the Doctor, as I mentioned around the beginning of the video. Not even Stephen Moffat's episode could save this show. I think that the Space Babies was the most childish episode I have ever seen. Now, I will say that some of the concepts for the monsters sounded okay on paper, like the Bogeyman. He would have been great in a horror-themed episode. The babies just ruin it completely for me. And the worst episode is The Devil's Cord. Not just because of Jinx Monsoon, but the inaccuracy of the Beatles, the inaccuracy of Cilla Black as well. I'm pretty sure that William Hartnell, William Russell, Sidney Newman, Verity Lambert, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, John Lennon, George Harrison, Cilla Black and Paul O'Grady would be turning in their graves at this. And the musical ending had me cringing all throughout. The concept of 73 Yards sounded good, but until it got all political. Completely missed out on Dot and Bubble because I was busy that night doing a local event for local people. As for Rogue, number one, I thought Rogue was going to be an alternative Doctor because of the opposite colours of the clothing. As the Doctor was wearing red, he was wearing blue. But I don't like how sexual they had to make it. I don't think that it belongs on family television, especially in a show like Doctor Who. If you want to make it educational, at least make it educational about science, mathematics, and give them education on good moral standards. But this is too over the top. And plus they played Billie Eilish of all singers, who really needs to have a visit from the Justicars, and played it on an instrument like the violin or cello. And they did the same with Lady Gaga. Oh, but that's not the worst music that was played. Kylie Minogue. And here's a fun fact, or a sad fact I should say. That song was number one the day I was born. So I have that unfortunate coincidence. And all this build-up has been about Susan Twist. And we have the return of Sutek. I just think that this was all predictable. I mean, nothing really happened in The Legend of Ruby Sunday. But I do have to say that at least it built some suspense. And I would also like to point out an inaccuracy here. The dog thing that comes up at the end is kind of like a Nimbus from the comic Fountains of Forever, which featured the 10th Doctor and Gabby Gonzalez. But now we get to the main point of this video. I don't think Doctor Who will ever be what it used to be because of all this woke ideology that has been pushed since 2017. And I don't think it can ever recover. My solution to fixing this is the Doctor reflects on his past incarnations and look at their bravery and spirit and how they stopped monsters in the past. And go back to the real Doctor who is with the nobles and remerge with him, and so that he can regenerate into Ncuti again, or at least a new Doctor who is more masculine. Idris Elba would be a good alternative, or David Harwood. If you want to go the female Doctor route again, I would suggest you hire Lindy Booth as the Doctor, or you could have a Gen Z Doctor, one who is a traditional, who cares about all the masculine traits that a man should have. Other than that, I don't think that this show can be saved at all. This has gone down the same route as Star Wars has, and it's only going to get worse from here, folks. We're going to get something just as bad as The Acolyte very soon. I feel ashamed to be a Doctor Who fan sometimes. That the show has gone down to this level of degeneracy. A show that was once a British institution. A show that has been a landmark of Britain itself has gone to this. And you can be sure that Disney probably influenced a lot of the writing here. Now, my final words here are that if the show does get cancelled eventually, the fans will always be there to make up their own stories. No matter which incarnation we're on about, they will make a better story than the actual writers themselves, because they are fans of the show, because they are passionate about Doctor Who, and they know what the Doctor is, they know the companions, they know the monsters and villains. So I think that we, the fans, are the last hope here. Another thing I want to talk about is disagreements in the fandom. Now, we can all agree to disagree on each other's views without attacking one another. Especially from the left. This is the left side of the fandom that do this mostly. And all I have to say is, let's just agree to disagree. Because in the end, we're Doctor Who fans. It's what we've all got in common. And something that we all know and love is Doctor Who. No matter which incarnation you like, we are fans, which is the most important thing. And also, before we go, I now have a Japanese in 15 minutes instruction booklet. So I got one of my words for the outro wrong. So see you soon. So dewa mata means see you soon. So I'd like to thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you all soon. So arigato, sayonara, dewa mata.